Okay. Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Bitter Pill. Uh, oh, Oops, let me exit out of this. I'm sorry. The echo there. So today I wanted to talk about the explosion of activism around uh, the Israeli genocide across the country, at college campuses across the country. And it's been going on for a few weeks. Well, I mean, the activism has been going on ever since it started, I should say. But what I meant to say was that for the past several weeks, starting, I believe, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, with Vanderbilt University, students have taken to building encampments uh, outside of administration buildings or student unions and so forth, and demanding that, so basically a 24/7 protest, and demanding that their universities divest from uh, any companies that are doing business with Israel, as well as cutting ties such as academic exchange programs and so on and so forth. And as the title says, Columbia University has been kind of ground zero for these efforts, um, because there's both, on one hand, an intense amount of um, repression and smear campaigns, against pro-Palestinian activists, and on the other hand, there's just been a lot of activism around this issue at Columbia University for a very long time. So, as you may know, world-renowned scholar, Palestinian American scholar Edward Said was a professor at Columbia University for several decades. Joseph Massad is another very well-known professor at Columbia who's very pro-Palestinian, certainly, and many others. And there's been just on the dark side, you have people like Hillary Clinton, who's an adjunct professor at Columbia, the infamous jerk, Zionist Israeli American professor Shai Davidai, who I'll talk about a little more in a little while, just constantly doxing and smearing and personally attacking protesters, trying to get people fired, and so forth. So, just in general, certainly, as you might expect, given that college campuses in many parts of the world have been, a focal point of activism about all kinds of issues. The Vietnam War during the 60s and 70s, during the 80s, when I was in college and grad school. South African apartheid was a big issue. The Divest Now campaign was a very major focus of campus life, as well as activism protesting against U.S. support for fascist governments, as well as counter-revolutionaries in Central America. And in the case of apartheid, not only was there a lot of activism because youth on college campuses are more likely to be politically active than the general population anyway, but also both youthful idealism or whatever, and just a large mass of pretty educated people congregated in a small space. Makes it easier to politically organize, but also universities are especially the large ones like Harvard and Columbia, and so on and so forth, are big institutional investors, and they have huge investments in companies that do business with various nefarious actors. So in the 80s, many universities had large investments in companies that did business with South Africa. So, a focus of the efforts to get institutions to divest from South Africa was focused on universities. And that's the case with Israel today, where, because of the large number of Jewish people here in the United States, where I live, there are a large number of academic and cultural ties with Israel as well. But in any case, as I was starting to say, Columbia University, located in uptown Manhattan in New York City, has in a sense been ground zero of the struggle against U.S. support for Israeli genocide over the past few months, where, from the very beginning, there was this clash between a large amount of student and faculty activism around the issue and attempts to repress that activism. So in the aftermath of large protests and public events, public speaking events about the Israeli genocide in Palestine, Columbia University's administration suspended the Columbia chapters of the activist group Students for Justice in Palestine and Jewish Voice for Peace. You have, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of prominent loudmouthed Zionists, such as Shai Davidai, the Israeli business professor, I think, and visiting professor Hillary Clinton, whatever fuck she is, I don't know. You had a lot of cancellations of public speaking events regarding Palestine. Just out of the blue, the administration would say, "Sorry, you can't have this speaker here. It's you're supporting terrorism by having them, or it's anti-Semitic, or some shit like that." Including just this week, I believe, yesterday, maybe, I can't remember when it was. There was an event honoring former Professor Edward Said, the late Edward Said, who was as I mentioned earlier, probably the most famous Palestinian American scholar in the country. He was a professor at Columbia University for a very long time. There's just been a relentless campaign, obviously not just at Columbia, but throughout the country, certainly on the part of Joe Biden and his administration and Congress and the mainstream media and so forth. Just relentless efforts to smear activists as anti-Semitic, even though many of them, especially in New York City, obviously, being Jewish, smear them as being pro-terrorist or what have you. Just anything to try and take the focus off of what's actually happening in Palestine, where Israel is, committing what to me is, the International Court of Justice says that South Africa made a plausible case that Israel was committing genocide in Gaza, and almost certainly whenever their decision comes down, I would think, given the voluminous evidence that South Africa presented, I'm sure they will find Israel indeed guilty of genocide in Gaza, although it's going to take probably a couple of years to make that decision. That's a little late for the Palestinians, so hence they issued the interim ruling that there was a plausible case. But anyway, and then in the West Bank, you could argue there's genocide happening there too, just at a slower rate. People's houses and other infrastructure being destroyed or being pushed off of the land. A lot of them are being killed, not nearly as many as in Gaza, but hundreds and hundreds since October 7th. But the powers that be here in the United States and in the West would have us believe that people being upset about this, protesting this, etc., are doing so because they're because they hate Jews and love terrorists or something, rather than because the obvious facts about what's happening. So anyway, Columbia has been a big part of that. They've attempted to fire pro-Palestinian faculty members such as Joseph Massad. But in spite of it all, the courageous resistance of the student activists, whose numbers are just growing exponentially, fighting against the genocide and for Palestinian freedom, has not stopped and will not stop. Will not stop. Okay, well, let's talk about this pro-Israel loon, Shai Davidai. Let's see. That's not what I meant to share. Present. Share screen. Okay, I'll just show this because it's just kind of summarizes what this asshole's been up to. So this professor at Columbia, Shai Davidai, who's a Jewish, I don't know if he's Jewish American, I don't know if he has American citizenship or not, but anyway, he's a prof at Columbia, and he's constantly personally attacking his own students, basically, who he characterizes as Hitler Youth and, of course, supporters of Hamas and supporters of terrorists and anti-Semitic, and even though many of them are Jewish, and so on and so forth. And he apparently was in some way associated with two Israeli Columbia students who were in the IDF, the Israeli military, who attacked the demonstrators at a protest back in January with some sort of chemical spray, like skunk spray or something, and caused a number of them to have to go to the hospital. And this guy's basically cheering it on. I mean, not explicitly, but he certainly wasn't condemning it. And just constantly like showing up, pretending like he's afraid that he and other Jews at Columbia have reason to be afraid of pro-Palestine activists. There's a claim that it's dangerous on campus for them because people don't like the government that Shai supports in the country that he's a citizen of. So basically, he publishes these lies on social media about people, and he shows up at protests, which I don't think he would do if he were actually afraid, and films people. Just a real fun guy. So this is a petition that's been going around to get him fired from his job because he's just harassing people constantly. So they say, since the video of Columbia Business School assistant professor Shai Davidai delivering a speech accusing the Columbia students of being pro-terror went viral on October 18th, 2023, he has been using his newfound social media platform to bully pro-Palestine students of color with complete impunity, despite being untenured. Under the guise of fighting anti-Semitism, he uses his Twitter, now X, and Instagram accounts to incite harassment and violence against these students. Shai's usage of his social media platform to harass students is a clear violation of university policy and an abuse of power from a faculty member. Shai has claimed that any opposition toward him is, quote, anti-Semitism. I won't read you the whole thing, but just mention some of the incidents. On October 13th, last year, Shai Davidai doxed a student at the University of Kansas for expressing pro-Palestinian sentiments with the explicit intention that all his friends in hiring committees are aware of this. So you're trying to get people not to hire this student when they graduated. On January 26, 2024, he issued a call to action linking an email template to send to the Columbia University administration. This pre-written email provides the full name of a Palestinian student organizer, misattributing the words of another student to her. So, basically trying to defame the student and get people to attack them. Mariam is her name. On March 21st, 2024, Shai Davidai accused a Palestinian student of being, quote, a prominent organizer of the pro-Hamas protests and trying to silence one of the most prominent Jewish politicians in New York City. The student about whom he spoke was merely questioning the politician's decision to, quote, shame a private citizen for free speech on her government account. So anyway, it goes on like this. On April 4th, 2024, Davidai showed up to a rally in support of Al-Shifa Hospital, which, as you know, has been besieged by the Israeli military for months. Recently, mass graves in which hundreds of people were buried, showing signs of torture and sexual assault and so forth recently. So anyway, he showed up at a rally in support of Al-Shifa to disrupt the protests. While a student was speaking about her experience being sexually assaulted, he screamed into a megaphone, drowning her out. He also went up to multiple students to harass them. And there are many other incidents. I won't keep going, but that's one of the reasons why I think it's fair to characterize Columbia as a kind of ground zero of both sides of the struggle. So anyway, as I mentioned, the tent cities or encampments, whatever you want to call them, started to sprout up in March at various universities, calling for divestment, basically a 24/7 protest, starting at Vanderbilt University, I believe. And, finally in mid-April or so, Columbia University became one of the, decided to join in on these protests. And let me just talk about some of the events leading up to this. Early this, I think I mentioned that I believe in December, at the end of the semester, pretty much, the Columbia University administration suspended the campus chapters of Students for Justice in Palestine and Jewish Voice for Peace, really trying to disrupt their activism. Fast forward to early this month, After students organized an event focused on Palestine. This is from Electronic Intifada, by the way. Great website, great podcast on YouTube. You should definitely watch and read their stuff. They do wonderful work, and a lot of it. So, in response to students basically just organizing an event focused on Palestine, the administration suspended 4 students and issued them eviction orders from student housing with only 24 hours notice. And then in mid-April, the president of Columbia University, Manoush Shafiq, testified before Congress about what was going on at Columbia and how it was a hotbed of anti-Semitism and all that crap. Basically, what happened in the hearings was that she was being grilled by all these Zionist Congress people who were saying, "Hey, you got to do something about all that anti-Jew hate going on at your university." And she's like, "Yeah, I am." And they're like, "Well, what have you fired this person? Have you fired that person? Etc." And she's like, "Yeah, I did." And she misrepresented things that they had said and so on. But let me just, oh, darn it, I don't have it called up. I will have to go to YouTube here and find it. Give me just a minute. Electronic Intifada. Okay, let me just go ahead and play this clip here of an interview with Mohammed Abdu, a professor, visiting professor at Columbia, who was attacked and misrepresented by the president of his university at this congressional hearing. So it's maybe 5 minutes or so. So let's have a look here.
To connect, but we'll try to get them on it a later date. But yeah, I mean, here in the Bay Area, we have encampments at UC Berkeley. I think one at Stanford just
talk to us about. He is Mohammed Abdu, a visiting professor at the Department of Middle Eastern, South Asian, and African Studies at Columbia University, which of course is in New York. He is a former assistant professor of sociology at the American University of Cairo, and he completed a postdoctoral fellowship at Cornell University. Mohammed Abdu is also the author of Islam and Anarchism, published in 2022 by Pluto Press. Mohammed has also been spending time with the students at their encampment on the Columbia University campus. Mohammed, we are really pleased to have you join us right now.
Hi, Mohammed. Oh, I think you're muted.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
It's an honor to be with you, Ali.
Thank you, Mohammed. We're going to talk about what has happened to you, but first I want to ask you, you've been spending, as I said, you've been spending a lot of time with the students at the encampment on campus amid continuous threats and acts of violence from the Columbia University administration. Can you tell us what the mood is like there among the students?
Well, first of all, Assalamu alaikum. It's an honor to be with you all. Usually I start any public discussion with Musa's dua, so just allow me that if you don't mind. اللهم اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. اللهم اشرح لي صدري, O Creator, may you open thy breast, ويسر لي أمري, and make my...
Even the National Guard, which is students at Columbia, released a statement saying that they had been threatened, as you said, by university administrators with whom they were in discussions, that they would send in the NYPD, the New York Police Department, again, and even the National Guard, which is shocking considering the infamous history of the National Guard attacking student protesters during the Vietnam War and killing 3 students at Kent State University in Ohio. And of course, in 1968, the police attacking students at Columbia University. So it really is an infamous history that's being repeated. And now, of course, the person behind these threats and actions is Minouche Shafik, the president of Columbia University. And earlier this month, Mohammed, she appeared before the House Committee on Education and joined hardline pro-Israel members of Congress in attacking you and 2 other Columbia professors by name, Professors Joseph Massad and Catherine Franke. While the attacks on all of you by the members of Congress and by President Shafik were outrageous, unfair, false, defamatory, and deeply harmful, what distinguishes the assault on you is that you do not have tenure. While all of you are vulnerable amid this terrifying McCarthyite assault, that does put you in a particularly precarious position. I want to show a clip of the testimony given by President Shafik in Congress on the 17th of April, and then I'll ask you for your reaction. Let's roll that clip.
Who are supporting terror. And it's not just that case. Let me bring your attention to Muhammad Abdu, who was hired after the October 7th terrorist attack against Israel. He, on October 11th, posted, yes, I'm with Hamas and Hezbollah and Islamic Jihad. He also decried false reports accusing Arabs and Muslims of decapitating the heads of children and being rapists. We know that there were decapitations of babies, of innocent Israeli citizens, of seniors, of women. There were rapes, and yet Columbia hired this individual as a professor. How did that hiring process work? Were you aware?
Okay, well, of course, all the crap she's saying has been debunked, as I've talked about on this show many times. He was actually hired before October 7th, but anyway. Typical Zionist liar.
Aware of those statements before the hiring?
I share with you your repugnance at those remarks. I completely understand that. On my watch, faculty who make remarks that cross the line in terms of anti-Semitism, there will be consequences for them.
What are the consequences
I have
in this
5
case?
cases at the moment who have either been either taken out of the classroom or dismissed.
And is he one of those?
He will never work at Columbia again.
He has been terminated?
He has been terminated. And not just terminated, but his files will show that he will never work at Columbia again.
So he's currently not employed by Columbia.
He is grading his students' papers and will never teach at Columbia again. And that will be on his permanent
How are you?
record.
So, Mohammed, before I go to you, I want to point out that the member of Congress we just saw there, Elise Stefanik, a Republican from New York, actually misquoted you, along with that whole stream of lies about beheaded babies and rapes and so on that regular viewers of this live stream know, just atrocity propaganda and fabrications. But with reference to you, she took a few words of out of a long and nuanced text which you had posted on Facebook on October the 11th. In one sentence of that post, you state, and I quote, "Yes, I am with the Muqawama, the resistance, be it Hamas and Hezbollah and Islamic Jihad, but up to a point, given ultimate differences over our ethical, political commitments. That's the difference between a strategy and a tactic too." End quote. So, Mohammed, what is your reaction to how President Shafiq responded to Representative Stefanik's attack on you?
Thank you, Ali. Well, clearly it was feckless, was asinine. The reality of the matter is Shafiq lied on several counts. Number one, I am not terminated. My contract is coming to an end May 30th. Number two, I was not hired in October. I was hired in May of last year, while I was just wrapping up my postdoctoral.
Okay, let me just clarify for those of you who don't know how academia works. What he's pointing out there is that he's a visiting professor, which basically means you have a contract for a specified term, like a year or 6 months or whatever it is. Usually it's a year, and or up until the end of the spring semester typically, and you just are not employed by that university after that. You go and work wherever else. And so she, basically to kiss ass in front of Congress, gave the impression that she was firing Mohammed Abdu, when in fact, basically, they're just not hiring him again, which, it's a pretty typical situation anyway with visiting professorships. Somebody's on leave or whatever, and you're visiting to take their place. I did that back in the 1990s on a few occasions. Once the person who's on leave comes back, your term is up. So she's trying to give the impression that she's firing him, when in fact, he's just leaving because his contract's up. So, this was one of many lies she told at this hearing.
Doctoral fellowship as well as visiting scholar position at Cornell University. And it is rather quite astonishing, the blasé claims with regards to when executive decisions that really undermine any kind of bureaucratic recourse, ethical adjudications by scholars who are supposed to be my peers, insofar as the evaluation of my work, of the very context of fact-checking what it is that I said, all that were surpassed, if you will. And this was an attempt to actually, as a matter of fact, torpedo any possibility for my hiring that was actively being taken by faculty as well as students, given the interdisciplinary nature of the work that I do. And it speaks to a great deal of issues, if you will, that we have in terms of values, in terms of problems, as well as solutions and actions that I think are worthy of sitting down and discussing subversion of First Amendment protected rights, freedom of speech, assembly, religion. As a scholar, I was hired by Columbia to teach, to be critical, to challenge, to be challenged. This is part of my learning and part of my own growth, to be actually questioned by my students. And a wide array of different fields. I'm an expert of settler colonial studies. I'm an expert in Islamic and arguably even Jewish studies, queer, gender, sexuality, abolition, and so on and so forth. I wrote my dissertation on Islam and queer Muslims. I have issues with movements that embody authoritarian tendencies, hierarchical tendencies, queerphobic, gender, sexist commitments, or the lack thereof. So these become very vital in terms of my evaluation, whether these movements are so-called Islamist, which is an Orientalist term within itself, or whether these issues exist on the left, within leftist movements. To me, humbly, I say that the reason that I was also targeted is because the argument that I make in my own scholarship. There's 531 years of settler colonialism here on Turtle Island. And this becomes rather key because I work within the historical, material, symbolic, and spiritual context of 1492 globally. What happened with Muslims and Jews in Spain? What happened insofar as indigenous people over here and the ongoing genocide of indigenous people? And what Saadia Hartman refers to as afterlife to slavery projects, anti-blackness, Sandia Ground laws, school to prison nexus, and so on and so forth. My experience thus created a chilling effect, both within the academy, in my opinion, but it also applies to a wide array of different workplaces and the general public, which says that if you choose to dissent outside the purview of the mainstream of what is manufactured as consent, you'll be punished, you'll be publicly humiliated, you'll be exposed to character assassinations, your personal information will be discussed online by power structures in the US, which also, of course, extends to non-academic as well as governmental actors. It means that in this particular case, that the powers that be, the architects of animosity, are trying to exacerbate differences that exist between us and benefiting of the very fruits upon which conflict is reared, is given air to, such that we're not able to do what it is that we should be doing.
Okay. He goes on for a bit like that, but I guess what I mainly wanted to show was just him pointing out her misrepresentations of him, and she did so with other faculty members as well as the student protesters. Basically, agreed with the allegations that they were anti-Semitic, even though many of them were Jewish, and they're supporting Hamas and terrorism and so on and so forth. So basically just kind of throwing the students and faculty that she is supposed to be serving as their president, throwing them under the bus, to score some political points with Congress, and to not suffer the same fate as other university administrators, presidents who were fired because they didn't fully go along with this McCarthyist smear campaign, against people showing solidarity with Palestinians in the face of Israel's genocide and ethnic cleansing. So just remarkably disingenuous and cowardly performance on her part. And that, as well as the fact that students had been suspended, and just all this repression of student movements that I mentioned, and then her testimony resulted in Columbia students organizing a tent city and encampment in the main quad at Columbia of several hundred students, and her response to that was, of course, to call the cops and have them arrested. So well over 100 were arrested, and 3 more students were suspended. One of whom is I forget her name. I have it here in my bookmarks. The daughter of Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, whose name is Isra Hersey. So she says about her suspension. I'm an organizer with Columbia University Apartheid Divests. At Columbia Students for Justice in Palestine. And in my 3 years at Barnard College, which is the women's college at Columbia, I have never been reprimanded or received any disciplinary warnings. I just received notice that I am one of 3 students suspended for standing in solidarity with Palestinians facing a genocide. And those of us in Gaza Solidarity Encampment will not be intimidated. We will stand resolute until our demands are met. Our demands include divestment from companies complicit in genocide, transparency of Colombia's investments, and full amnesty for all students facing repression. So let's have a look at another student's statement. Miriam, I don't recall her last name. It's not in her profile. And talking about her suspension, which the suspensions were accompanied by evictions from their student housing. And those evictions, unlike the other ones that gave 24 hours notice, which is still not very much, basically they were to vacate their housing immediately, and informed of this, in the middle of the night, given 15 minutes to get their stuff. So Miriam says, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing her name right. She says, it's 2 a.m. I was forced to stand outside the Barnard gates for an entire hour, waiting for someone to let me in. You're in the middle of uptown New York. While Barnard Public Safety told me they are going above and beyond by even considering allowing me into my own room for 15 minutes. I haphazardly packed and have left. Giving us 15 minutes to pack up and leave from our housing is seriously twisted. I am not surprised at all. I am glad administration is finally showing their face to the general student body, because student organizers have known from the start how evil these administrators are. And not only did they suspend these 3 students, effective immediately, kicking them out onto the street, basically, that very night, but they even made posters about them to distribute to front desks at all dorms on campus. These 3 students were all Barnard students, the women's college at Columbia. Barnard made their own banned on campus poster for me. These are being circulated at front desks at all Barnard dorms. So it has her name, her student ID, her email, her phone number, room number, her age, etc., her class schedule. So basically, the university is doxing her, as well as, the obvious safety issue of putting women out on the street at 2 a.m. So just absolutely absurd. Oh, I forgot to switch over to this. Sorry about that. Let you have a read there if you want. Just incredible. So last they went on suspending people because immediately after the cops came in and arrested a lot of people and broke up the encampment, another one was set up that was even bigger, more people involved, and faculty members showed up en masse as well, and so they decided, let's suspend some more students. So last I heard, it was up to 70 students suspended. Somebody please give us an update if you've heard further information about that. About 15 of the 70 were Jewish, and it's still going on. And there's certainly no doubt that the student body is solidly behind the protests, even if they're not at the protests. So there was a referendum held at Columbia where students overwhelmingly, by a margin of like 70% in favor, passed a referendum calling on the university to divest from its assets associated with companies doing business in Israel. They also voted in favor of canceling the Tel Aviv Global Center and ending Columbia's dual degree program with Tel Aviv University. This is in the Columbia Spectator, which is the student newspaper there. They also had, and I unfortunately don't have time to talk about this with you, but they also had a wonderful editorial, just laying out how scandalous the administration's conduct was and how unacceptable it was that they were engaging in this repression of students and ignoring the issue that the students were protesting about. So I'll certainly put a link to that editorial in the video. And one thing that I wasn't sure whether to mention it in the intro or here, but I'll go ahead and mention it here. Where is it? Okay, I guess I'll have to look for it. There's a history professor at Columbia who wrote up a little piece about the sordid past of Columbia University. Specifically, who one of the past presidents of Columbia for many decades was. So history prof. Barnaby Rain has this to say. As my employer, Columbia University, calls armed riot police into campus to smash a peaceful protest against the genocide, we must all speak out. My former students have been arrested. I'm proud of you. History will be too. Remember what I said in our first class last year. Nicholas Murray Butler was president of Columbia University from 1902 to 1945. So a really fucking long time. A Nobel Peace Prize winner, just like Barack Obama and Henry Kissinger. Pretty worthless prize, if you ask me. A respected American. As president, Butler changed Columbia's admissions process to cut in half the number of Jewish students. When a fascist, Benito Mussolini, seized power in Italy in a coup, Butler established a center at Columbia, the Casa Italiana. It's still there, to help the fascist government disseminate propaganda in America. When Hitler took power in Germany, Butler invited the Nazi ambassador to speak in the what at the time was called Low Library. He wore a suit and tie, so Butler called him a gentleman, a Nazi gentleman. He said the goal of Columbia was to train gentlemen. Nazis, I guess. A Jewish Columbia professor, Jerome Klein, signed a letter of protest against the invitation to a Nazi, so Butler fired him. The Nazis expelled all the Jewish professors from Heidelberg University, then held a festival of German excellence there. Butler sent a representative from Columbia to join the Nazi celebration of German excellence. But here's the beautiful thing. Hundreds of Columbia students were disgusted. They marched to Butler's home, the grand residence where Columbia's president still lives. They staged a mock book burning. They covered his home in anti-Nazi signs while he held a dinner party inside and ignored them, of course. One of the leaders of the protest was Robert Burke, a working-class Irish-American student from Ohio. Why was he there? Burke's family admired Irish Republican anti-colonial politics. As you may know, Ireland, the Irish people have been very much, unlike all the rest of Europe, pretty much in solidarity with the Palestinians, given their colonial history of being colonially occupied. Anyway, Burke got to Columbia on a sports scholarship as a boxer, then rose to the top of his class academically. He had to work before and during his studies in a steel mill and driving trucks, and then near campus, watching the dogs of the wealthy. One night, Burke won a boxing final in Madison Square Garden and then rushed back to Columbia to join a picket line at Teachers College, where elevator operators were on strike. He helped to organize the pickets of barbershops in the area that refused to serve Black customers. He hated the domination of some people over others. he was not a, quote, gentleman. He shouted at Butler, "Hey, Nikki, we hate Hitler. Why don't you?" Sounds like some protesters many of us are familiar with these days, who publicly shame public figures like Hillary Clinton and AOC and so on and so forth. Nicholas Murray Butler had Robert Burke expelled from Columbia University, destroying his academic record so he could never study anywhere else. The American left rallied to a big campaign defending Burke. Working class students from Hunter College even picketed Butler's house. Columbia would not budge. In 1946, after World War II, Butler put the finishing touches to his new library, which stands at Columbia's heart today. I looked it up, and I Googled it, and indeed, Columbia's library is called the Butler Library, in honor of a fucking Nazi. He insisted a list of names should be engraved on it, men he regarded as the ancestors of white civilization. Columbia happily obliged, then named the library after him. Robert Burke spent his whole life working for labor unions and in the civil rights movement, meeting Martin Luther King and organizing undocumented workers in California. Columbia has refused repeated requests to reinstate his degree or to apologize to him. When a book detailed all this history a few years ago, Columbia's then president Bollinger refused to attend the launch of the book. I am telling you all this by way of introduction because my greatest hope as a teacher is to train more Robert Burkes. This class will be a politically intense experience, but it will be intellectually intense too, because here's the rub. Robert Burke worked with the Young Communist League in a 1930s political world quite different from our own. So the challenge is not simply to admire him, it is to work out how to reawaken some of his hopes in different times. So, I thought that was just a wonderful statement. Anyway, let's move on to, I'm going to talk a little more about the repressive atmosphere that's kind of swept across the country, along with encampments that have also swept across the country in solidarity with Colombia and, of course, with the Palestinians. But I just came across today an incident involving someone who, to my knowledge, and he may have been, but he didn't mention anything about it, has not been involved in the protests, but had a bit of a run-in with security at Columbia earlier today. And that's Professor Carl Hart, who is a black professor at Columbia, a researcher on drug addiction, a former drug addict himself, and a gang member, I guess. But now, he's a very well-known and admired professor at Columbia who does this important research. And anyway, he says, just had explosive interaction with Columbia's heightened security coming onto campus. So basically, if you don't know, in response to the encampment to try and prevent people from outside coming in and joining the protest, Columbia has locked the gates to the university and only allow, and of course this keeps out the students they've suspended, locked the gates to the university, keeping out anybody who didn't have an ID. So he says, just had explosive interaction with Columbia's heightened security coming onto campus. They followed me to my office and then lied, saying I didn't scan my ID for entry. I did. And that I pushed an officer. I didn't. An ugly scene followed. They did this to me, a tenured full professor. This is not the first hostile interaction I've had since the new heightened, aggressive, suspicious security police. Imagine how they are treating our black male students. Hey, President Shafiq and politicians, how about also being concerned about anti-black hostility and discrimination? Not to mention anti-Palestinian and Arab and Muslim hostility and discrimination. But anyway, as I was mentioning, in light of the wonderful activism at Columbia and the horrid response to it, there have been encampments popping up at universities all over the country. So I believe the first one was at NYU, and there have been dozens of others. Brown University, Stony Brook University, just devoted to divest from Israel. I don't know if they have an encampment yet, but probably so by this point. Yale, North Carolina, University of California, Berkeley, University of Southern California, and just today one started at UCLA. Let me show you something about the one at USC. Well, there's a picture of a very large crowd there, and they did form an encampment. And what sparked their protest was that the valedictorian of Southern California was involved in Palestinian activism, because she's I don't know if she's Palestinian American herself or Arab American, Muslim American, or what, but in any case, she's involved in the Palestine solidarity activism. And when the administration got wind of this, they decided that they were going to cancel her valedictorian speech at graduation. And now, although I guess they have individual graduation ceremonies for the different schools or colleges or whatever at USC, the general graduation ceremony, where they have the valedictorian speech and all the pomp and circumstance and so forth, the graduation ceremony has been canceled. So seniors at University of Southern California don't get to have that part of their graduation ceremony, because basically their administration are assholes who don't like free speech. Anyway, let me just go through some other places, and please let me know if you have heard of any others that I don't mention. Barnard, okay, that's at Columbia. Berkeley, Columbia. Emerson College, which is in Boston. University of Maryland, University of Michigan, Massachusetts Institute of Technology in Boston, the New School, which I believe is in New York City, NYU, I mentioned that, Rutgers University in New Jersey, Tufts University, Vanderbilt University, Washington University, Yale University. I believe in New Jersey, Princeton has also set up one. University of New Mexico, someone says. University of North Carolina, I mentioned. University of Texas, Austin is another one. University of Alberta, Cal Poly Humboldt, formerly Humboldt State, and they managed to barricade themselves at Humboldt. They managed to barricade themselves in a building and prevent the cops from arresting them, which was pretty cool, I thought. Miami of Ohio, University of Minnesota, University of New Mexico, University of Pittsburgh, Rice University, University of Rochester, Smith College, which I believe is that in New York City? Stanford, Swarthmore College in Pennsylvania, University of Sydney in Australia, Brown University, City College of New York, Cornell, University of Florida, GWU in DC, UCLA, Northwestern University, some university I'm unfamiliar with in France, and the list goes on. And as you might expect, this has been responded to with all sorts of repression. So at NYU, they have constructed a wall, plywood wall, trying to cut off students or others from the center of campus. At University of Minnesota, I believe that's what they meant. They just ordered the janitors to shut off the water supply, lock the bathrooms, and lock the doors to the student union, where pro-Palestine protests have set up an encampment. Okay, now what does that sound like? Building a wall and turning off the water supply? Doesn't that sound like what Israel did in Palestine? Of course, they've done lots of other things besides that, but those are two things they've done. And October 7th involved breaching the wall that Israel had constructed to basically imprison Palestinians in Gaza. I mentioned at Columbia, there were negotiations between Students for Justice in Palestine and the administration. They wanted to keep the encampment up and had some demands. And the university threatened to call the National Guard in after refusing to bargain in good faith. They presented a statement about that. I'm not going to read through it all because we've already been going for an hour and 10 minutes here. But I'll put a link to it. Okay, I mentioned the mass suspensions at Columbia. There have been many other universities that have suspended students. Columbia University decided that they would just not, for the most part, have classes on campus for the rest of the semester. Just out of the blue. Columbia Public Safety tried to force the campus radio station off of the air. As someone pointed out, during the height of the COVID pandemic, once people started getting vaccinated en masse, colleges and universities started lifting pretty much all restrictions on in-person classes and mask wearing and so on and so forth, which at some point it had to happen, assuming that they were going to do something else to control infections, like put air filters in the classrooms or something like that, or require masks. They didn't do any of that. So someone pointed out they couldn't do it, meaning canceling or limiting in-person classes for basic COVID safety, but they'll do it to avoid people protesting genocide. At University of Minnesota, immediately after the encampment was set up, police just broke up and arrested all students at the University of Minnesota encampment for Gaza, charging them with trespassing and banning all students from campus for 1 year. Can you believe that? Banning the students that they arrested for trespassing at their own university, banning them from campus for an entire year. Just outrageous. This is a scene at the University of Texas, Austin. Just a massive number of Texas I'm not sure what branch of the police they're from, but you can see them just being brutal toward the protesters. There was an incident just today at Emory University, which I didn't mention, but another school that set up an encampment just today. Let's see, where is it? The Atlanta police came down on protesters at Emory University, and they were tasing people. They had people handcuffed, and they were tasing them. Let me see if I can. Well, I don't know if YouTube wants me to show this. You know how YouTube is. Georgia State Patrol and police violently attacked pro-Palestinian student demonstrators at Emory University in Atlanta. Tens of students were arrested after authorities reportedly used tasers and pepper spray to forcibly disperse the gathering within the university campus. So isn't our First Amendment wonderful? Great freedom of speech that we have here in this country. Among the people arrested, basically shoved around, physically assaulted, was the chair of the philosophy department at Emory. Let's see, do I have anything about that? Oh, here we go. Shoot, I thought I had it a minute ago. Oh, yeah, here we go. Now that Georgia police have brought out the rubber bullets at University of Georgia, or excuse me, at Emory University, again, entirely peaceful protest. I mean, they weren't doing anything destructive or violent or anything like that. And the cops were just absolutely brutal toward them. But let's bear in mind, though, that as the organizers that these demonstrations have repeatedly called on people to do, let's keep the focus on Palestine. That's where, as brutal as our police here are being, as repressive as college administrations are being, as censorious and slanderous as the corporate media and politicians and university administrations and so forth are being towards people involved in the protests against the genocide and for Palestinians' rights. Let's bear in mind how much worse things are in Palestine, not only in Gaza, which is like, almost unprecedented in the last few decades, as far as just the level of sheer brutality. Tens of thousands have killed, 2 million people displaced from their homes, out of 2 million almost, basically. Just, a really horrible situation. And, even in the West Bank, things are just absolutely terrible. So, I mean, that should be our main concern, but certainly, students not being able to, and faculty members, and really all of us, not being able to safely exercise our First Amendment rights to freedom of speech and freedom of assembly in this country, and to not have our reputations smeared by these vicious lies. That's certainly very concerning, and although not quite like Israel, one would have to say fascistic. But in any case, people are not, it's not having the intended effect on people. They're just getting more angry and more determined, and resistance is spreading, across the country. And indeed, people are speaking up all over the world in support of these protests. So at Columbia, there was a massive faculty walkout in solidarity with the student protesters. Cornell West. You can just follow along with me here. In the interest of time, I'm not going to click on all these, but just show you the text. So Cornell West showed up at the protest at Columbia. I mentioned the wonderful editorial in the Columbia University student newspaper, just castigating the university administration for their actions. Even a congressman, Jamal Bowman, condemned the right-wing demagoguery and efforts to suppress peaceful protest. Let's see. There have been cases of visiting professors at Columbia quitting their positions. So Dr. Tali Gaffey, I am a professor, and as of today, I quit my position as artist in residence at Columbia University, which I have served for the past 2 years. I am an associate professor at Hunter College, and in support of the courageous student protesters at Columbia, I cannot in good conscience, I assume it says continue, at Columbia. Someone else says, I withdrew from a workshop at Columbia in solidarity with the principal students who have taken enormous risks. As a historian, I refuse to talk about exile and carceral geographies at an institution that invites the NYPD to arrest its students, and that punishes them for protesting. Mohammed Safa from Palestine expresses his solidarity with students at American universities who are dealing with oppression for protesting the genocide in Gaza. Do not be afraid to speak the truth. Speaking up for things that align with your values does not ruin your career. It clears the way. 28 unions representing tens of thousands of workers are demanding the immediate reinstatement of all students and student workers disciplined for pro-Palestine protests and the end to the repression of protests at Columbia's campus. An injury to one is an injury to all. Susan Sarandon was another prominent person who attended the protest at Columbia just a few days ago. I understand Jill Stein is on her way to New York City, and I assume we'll be going to the protests. I got to meet her a couple of weeks ago. Wonderful person, and very glad she's running for president again, and looking forward to voting for her and to getting her on the ballot here in Indiana, where it's very hard to do that. Solidarity from Yemen in support of the students at Columbia. Students editorial boards at universities all around the country rebuke college officials for protest decisions, calling in the cops and arresting people and suspending people and so forth. This was actually published in the New York Times. So, I mean, they're still really shitty on the Israel-Palestine issue and pretty much any foreign policy issue, but somehow that got in there in the New York Times. Faculty at University of Texas Austin are going on strike tomorrow to protest police and state troopers mass arresting and beating students. Good for them. Students in Argentina, where the far-right Milei government is attacking public education, send a message of solidarity with the student movement for Palestine and the encampment at Columbia University. Okay, I'd like to. I know I've been going for a long time here, but I really want to play this message from a Holocaust survivor to U.S. campus protesters. That was Benjamin Netanyahu, in case you don't recognize his face, the scumbag who is prime minister of Israel, talking about how horrible it is that these protests are happening in American universities. And meanwhile, in Gaza, universities no longer exist because you bombed them out of existence, you asshole. I mean, there's nothing left of universities in Gaza. Okay, anyway, let's listen to more of this Holocaust survivors' expression of solidarity with the student protesters. Good point.
March. We get handshakes and hugs, and some people stand and some women cry seeing the placards. It's a great and warm experience. When the right-wing section of the present government is trying to press for the banning of these marches on the grounds that they create no-go areas for Jews and they are anti-Semitic. We know that this is complete rubbish, and the very opposite is true. Today's marches are having a very hopeful aspect, that it is so large, so persistent, so global, that eventually the Western leadership, which are trying to deny what is actually going on, will be forced to face up to it. And I think we are not far from that. I think there was no parallel to that in the Jewish Holocaust experience. In fact, there was great abandonment, certainly from the leadership of the country. There were some, very few, very brave people who risked everything to be on the right side of history and to rescue as much as possible. But the majority of people were too afraid and looked the other way. There is a question of historic responsibility towards injustice, genocide, and fascism. If you are just indifferent, if you do not take a stand, you acquire a degree of guilt without any doubt. And I think it is imperative to assert opposition and even at some degree of disadvantage and risk, if you want to be guilt-free when history judges what's happening. Knowing how.
Okay, so that was Holocaust survivor. I forget his name, but anyway, I apologize for cutting off the visual of the first half of the video. I will share the link in the description. There's a couple more things, and then I'll end this. As I've been mentioning all along, there's major Jewish involvement in the protests that goes back to the very beginning of them on October 8th, I guess. So I mentioned 15 of the students so far that I'm aware of at Columbia who were suspended for their participation in the protests are Jewish. One of the student groups at Columbia that was suspended was the student chapter at Columbia of Jewish Voice for Peace, and that's happened at a number of other universities. Basically everywhere that there's a large Jewish contingent of students, a lot of them have been involved in the protests. One interesting thing that I saw the other day. There's this dude, Ollie London, a Jewish right-wing political commentator who's been like Shai Davidai, been constantly smearing everyone he can think of who is critical of the Israeli government since day one of this escalation of the conflict and genocide. So he says, NYPD officers move in to begin mass arresting hundreds of Palestine activists after they blocked a street outside the home of Democrat Senator Chuck Schumer, who is Jewish. Activists shout, stop funding genocide. Well, notice something there. Let's go! Jews say, stop arming Israel. So what this idiot, this dishonest Israel shill doesn't mention is that it's irrelevant that Chuck Schumer is Jewish because like everybody in Congress just about is 100% behind Israel because AIPAC bribes them and so forth. But all of these protesters are Jewish. It's a Jewish Voice for Peace and Not in Our Name and so forth. One or more of those groups, I forget which, they're all Jewish. So hundreds of Jewish pro-Palestine activists protested in front of Senator Schumer's house, who happens to also be Jewish. But what's relevant that he leaves out here is that the protesters are Jewish. And so really, you could say that, contrary to the claims of people like this asshole, that people who criticize or protest against Israel are anti-Semitic, you could say people like him are anti-Semitic because they seem to believe that, or automatically assume that if someone is Jewish, that means they support Israel. That being Jewish equals being Zionist, which is just, ludicrous. Now, it's certainly true that, particularly among the older Jewish population, most of them are pro-Israel, but certainly on college campuses, you don't find that much with Jewish students at all. And not only are there all these smears of the sort that I've been talking about, saying that people are anti-Semitic, saying that they're pro-Hamas or pro-terrorist or whatever. I mean, not that I think being pro-Hamas, even though I share some of the criticisms that the fellow that was interviewed on Electronic Intifada that I showed earlier of groups like Hamas. I don't consider them to be terrorists, and I consider their uprising against Israeli fascist occupation to be justified. But in any case, it's just false that these protesters are necessarily pro-Hamas, and they're certainly not pro-terrorism or anti-Semitic. But there have been efforts to actually, stage fabricated, events, trying to depict the protesters as supporting violence against innocent people and so on and so forth. I'll just share one with you that, I can't prove it, but it certainly looks to me like this is what's going on. Let me find a video of it. Okay, well, all right, did I? My browser is frozen. This is not good. In fact, it appears that my computer has frozen. All right, guys. I don't know if you can hear me. Okay, looks like I'm back. I do not know what is going on. This is crazy. Okay, I'm going to just assume that you can hear me because you could last time something like this happened. I'm having major computer issues here. If you can hear me, please bear with me. Hopefully it'll resolve itself before too long here. Let me just try to close a couple of apps here so I can hopefully recover my computer here. Okay, I'm just gonna assume that things are working here. And close a couple more tabs, and hopefully that will calm things down a bit and I can finish this out. Okay, no, my camera was not unplugged. Okay, well, it looks like my camera is not unplugged, but it's not working. But I think I've still got audio. So what I was going to talk about was this alleged pro-Palestine protester who stood in front of a God, you can't even see it. This is so frustrating. It's just I'm not getting any comments from people, even though it says 23 people are watching. Never had this happen in the middle of a stream before. Okay, so you can't see this because my computer's frozen, but there's this person who claimed to be or presented themselves as a pro-Palestine protester, wrapped her face in a keffiyeh so you couldn't really see her face other than her eyes, and stood in front of a group of counter-protesters from the Israeli military. Excuse me, pro-Israel protesters holding Israeli flags. And so she stands in front of them with this sign that says Al-Qassam's next targets and points an arrow at them. And this was used to smear the protesters as if this one person who we don't even know who she is representative of the protesters. But we don't know who she is. And the interesting thing is that she misspelled Al-Qassam, which is the military wing of Hamas, on her sign. Now, you would think that somebody at Columbia University, a protester at Columbia University would spell check their sign before they, showed up to the protest, or they would just know. It's two S's and not one. So it makes me really suspicious that this person is just an infiltrator trying to smear the protesters. God, I can't even get apps to quit. This is really not good. Okay, so just one last thing. Oh, I've lost my notes here. So I'll just kind of wing it. Jesus Christ, this is crazy. Damn it. Okay, I'm just going to close with a statement from one of the protesters who was suspended from Colombia, which I thought was just an extraordinary example of courage and determination. She says, for my organizing with SJP, Students for Justice in Palestine, I have been doxxed, chemically attacked by IOF soldiers, smeared online, followed by the NYPD anti-terrorism unit, gotten brutalized by cops, been suspended, evicted, arrested. I am not exaggerating when I say there's nothing they can do to silence us. To be doxxed for Palestine is an honor. To be suspended for Palestine is an honor. To be arrested for Palestine is an honor. When I see that Palestinians in Gaza are telling us to keep protesting, nothing else matters. Everything I do is for Palestine, and I regret nothing. Okay, I have no idea if anybody can see anything here. So I'm just going to end this here. I hope you enjoyed and got something out of this live stream. I'm sorry for the technical difficulties here. I don't know what's happening, but I am going to share with you a number of the links that I talked about or alluded to in this podcast, and I will probably share a lot more of them on my Substack and write something up about this amazing movement for justice in Palestine that's really escalated like wildfire here this month of April. And I'm it's scary because the repression is enormous, but at the same time, I feel really hopeful. So I will talk to you next time. Take care, everybody.